All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review in our latest practice exam series, where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our famous combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Dale's dad taught him how to drive his car around their neighborhood. Once Dale got his license, Dale was able to drive all over the city. Dale's behavior did what? Okay, pretty straightforward question. The information is presented very cleanly to you. All we need to do is attack the question and answer what it's asking. And what it wants to know is what happens to Dale's behavior. So we know Dale's dad taught him how to drive his car around the neighborhood. Once Dale's dad did that, Dale got his license, and then Dale was able to drive all over the city. So not only did Dale continue to drive and be able to drive after being taught and after teaching was stopped and once he got his license, but he was also able to drive in other places outside his neighborhood. And the neighborhood is what we would consider the teaching environment. So if you can engage in the skill you were taught outside of your teaching environment, once the teaching was stopped, what do we consider that? Well, A, generalized, of course. He was taught in the neighborhood. Now he's able to drive all over the city. His behavior has clearly generalized to other parts of his city or wherever he lives. However, his behavior is also maintained because Dale, even after being taught and after the teaching is stopped and after he's got his license, he's able to drive off all over the place. He's still able to drive, and he doesn't need continuous teaching on how to drive. So here's a good lesson in why we always read all of our answer choices, because had we stopped at A, we would have missed B, and B is just as correct as A. C, overgeneralized. Well, overgeneralization occurs when responses take place in environments or settings where they shouldn't, and that's not the case here. Dale being able to drive all over the city is exactly what his dad wanted when he initially taught him in the neighborhood. So Dale's behavior is simply generalizing and maintaining. So Dale's behavior did what? Well, D, both A and B. Rachel refuses to wear the color green. She doesn't like the way she looks. On St. Patrick's Day, however, she wears green earrings. St. Patrick's Day functioned as a what? As always, when we're dealing with ABC questions, antecedents questions, MO questions, SD questions, we need to really start and break down and identify clear antecedents and clear consequences in the questions. So here, we're looking at St. Patrick's Day, okay? And what do we know? Well, we know Rachel doesn't like to wear green. She doesn't like the way she looks. However, when St. Patrick's Day comes around, she wears green. So what's changed? Well, St. Patrick's Day, right? St. Patrick's Day was an antecedent to wearing green. So we know it's not a consequence. Now, ask yourself, because we're looking at either an MO or an SD. It's not a prompt because St. Patrick's Day didn't come in between the SD and the response. So it has to be an MO or an SD. So in order to distinguish, we have to ask ourselves, was wearing green always available? Sure, Rachel could have wore green at any point, but she didn't like the way she looked. Okay, she didn't want to wear green. Wearing green wasn't reinforcing. She never wore green. However, when St. Patrick's Day rolled around, what happened? Well, the value of wearing green increased, and all of a sudden, Rachel wants to wear green. Even though it's always been available, only when St. Patrick's Day rolls around does her motivation to wear green increase, does the value of wearing green increase. Her behavior temporarily changes, therefore St. Patrick's Day is a motivating operation. Remember, an MO essentially makes you want or not want something. It's going to increase or decrease the value of a consequence. And SD just says it's available. So green has always been available. The difference is the motivation hasn't. Now that there's motivation there due to St. Patrick's Day, Rachel is now wearing the color green. A kindergarten teacher is teaching her class how to identify letters. The target letter is written in green on the board, and the other letters are written in black. Once the kids can identify the green letter, the teacher starts to write it in black as well. The teacher is doing what? Okay. One of the more complicated sounding terms, but actually pretty straightforward. And this is what this question is asking about. So first, we need to know what the teacher is doing. Okay. Teacher is teaching letter identification. At first, the target letter is written in green, other letters written in black. So this is essentially a prompt, right? A stimulus prompt. We're changing the color of the target letter to evoke the behavior you want to see, okay? So right now, what's evoking the behavior? Well, the green letter. Once the kids can identify the green letter, the teacher starts to write it in black as well, because we don't want the green letter to evoke the behavior. We just want the letter, right? And that letter needs to look like all the other letters. They need to be able to identify the letter without all these extra prompts. So what she's doing is she's transferring control from the green letter to just the regular black letter. So what is the teacher doing? A, thickening a reinforcement schedule. Well, she's certainly not thickening the reinforcement schedule. We're not even talking about the reinforcement schedule, so don't pick A. B, a stimulus transfer control procedure. Yes. Now, someone asked, is a stimulus transfer control procedure the same as prompting? It is. Prompting is a stimulus control transfer procedure. However, a stimulus transfer control procedure isn't always prompting. Now, for the sake of the RBT exam, really get ingrained in your head that typically when you use a stimulus transfer control procedure, you'll be using prompt fading. Because what you're doing is you're transferring control from an intrusive prompt to a more or a less intrusive prompt, right? If I go from a physical prompt to a gestural prompt, I've transferred control from a full physical to a gesture. That's a stimulus transfer control procedure. In this case, we're transferring stimulus control from green to black. Because remember, stimulus control occurs when behavior changes in the presence of a stimulus. And we don't want behavior changing just in the presence of this green, right? That's not what we want to control the behavior. We want the letter to control the behavior. So we've got to transfer control from green to the letter. C, adding an intrusive prompt. Nope, she's removing the prompt, right? She's fading a prompt. And then D, punishing the student behavior. Certainly not punishing the behavior. She's teaching them how to identify the targets. So again, stimulus transfer control procedure is something that sounds more complicated than it is. Think prompt fading, right? And we can also just in general, when behavior comes under stimulus control of different stimuli in the environment, well, to transfer control, you've got to reinforce that behavior in the presence of different stimuli. And that's why prompt fading works. So don't get overwhelmed by stimulus transfer control procedure. Just think prompt fading. Your supervisor wrote a new behavior plan that targets a client's screaming behavior. You're implementing the plan when the client's dad asks you to stop and that he does not want to use that type of plan. What should you do? All right, this is a difficult situation for any technician to be in because we know the technician's role is implementation, right? You're assisting on assessments, assisting on parent training. Sometimes you're even doing parent training by yourself with approval, right? However, in this case, this has just been kind of sprung on you, right? You have this new behavior plan. You're implementing the plan. The client's dad asks you to stop and says he doesn't want to use that type of plan. Well, now you're in a difficult spot, right? Because your supervisor says to use the plan. The stakeholder says, don't use the plan. What do you do? A, explain to the dad that you must follow the behavior plan exactly and continue. Well, of course not, right? You can't just neglect what the dad is saying. The dad might have legitimate concerns. So yes, you should follow the behavior plan exactly, but obviously in a situation like this, things have changed. B, stop implementation, but explain to the dad that you must follow the behavior plan exactly. Better, but you still don't need to explain to the dad why you're doing it. He knows why you're implementing the plan. Okay, you're missing a key step here. C, stop implementation and contact your supervisor immediately. This is what we're looking for, okay? Stop implementation, just don't do that behavior plan anymore and contact your supervisor immediately. We all have phones now. We all can reach out and get in contact with our supervisors pretty quickly now, right? And so in this case, that's what you need to do because the behavior plan for screaming might be very important. But if the dad is concerned, you can't just go on doing it right in front of him. So what you need to do is openly and promptly contact your supervisor. And then they contact your supervisor, but continue implementation until you hear back from them. You just can't, right? Because that's not your decision to make. The client's dad is voicing concerns. It's not your decision to neglect those concerns. So stop implementation, contact your supervisor immediately, and then proceed based on what they tell you. Chad is counting down the days until March Madness and his trip to watch basketball games with his friends. Chad tells his wife that there are 7 days left. Chad is using what measurement? Straightforward measurement question, right? Direct measurement question. Don't overthink it. So what is Chad doing? He's simply saying there are 7 days left. And how is he getting that number? Duration? Well, no. Duration is the time for a single response. Chad isn't taking the duration of each day, or he's not taking duration on his one response. He's counting how many days are left. Rate? No, he's not saying 7 days per. He just has a count. So C, count. And what might throw you off is you might say, well, aren't you talking about frequency? Well, frequency and count are the same thing. So Chad tells his wife that there are 7 days left. Chad is simply using a count. And then latency, of course not. The SD, time in between the SD and the response. It's a simple count, right? Count is the same as frequency. What's the difference between count and rate? Rate is simply count over time. Okay, so, straightforward question. But if you see count instead of frequency, don't panic. It's the same thing. Bob's teacher yells at him in class when he starts to talk to his classmates during a lecture. Bob now is quiet when his teacher is in the classroom, but will talk when his teacher is outside of the classroom. Bob's teacher's yelling is most precisely what? So this most precisely is important, okay? They want you to pick the best answer. In every question, you need to pick the best answer, but especially in this one. And we're looking at Bob's teacher's yelling. Not necessarily Bob's teacher, but the yelling. Because we know when Bob starts to talk to his classmates, Bob's teacher yells at him. And what happens as a result? Because that's the consequence. Bob now is quiet when his teacher is in the classroom. Bob's behavior has done what? Decreased. Why? Because of the yelling. So Bob's teacher's yelling functions as a what? A stimulus. Yes, his yelling, or the yelling, is a change in the environment. It is a stimulus. But more precisely, what is the yelling? It's not a reinforcer. It's not increasing anything. It's got to be a punisher, right? Bob's teacher, Bob talks, Bob's teacher yells, Bob's behavior decreases in the presence of his teacher. So his teacher is a stimulus, the yelling is the punisher. And that's an important distinction. The teacher now has stimulus control over Bob due to the yelling, which is the punisher. The teacher now signals to Bob that if he talks, yelling is going to be the consequence. So Bob is now quiet in the presence of his teacher because there's the potential that yelling could occur, and yelling functions as a C, punisher. Not a prompt, obviously, because it's a consequence. So Bob's behavior decreased as a result of the yelling. The yelling functions as a punisher. Your client skill acquisition plan calls for social skills training. You bring your client to the park and prompt them to talk with another boy who is there. Client talks to them for 5 minutes, plays with them for 10 minutes, rests for 2 minutes, and then talks to a different peer. What is the inter-response time for talking with peers? Now, what is inter-response time? Inter-response time is the time in between responses. More precisely, it's the time from the end of the first response to the start of the next response. In this case, the target is talking with peers. So we know the first time the client talks to the peer, he does for 5 minutes. He then plays for 10 minutes, rests for 2 minutes, and then talks to a different peer. So we have our 2 responses. We need to figure out how much time passed in between the end of the first response and the start of the second. Well, we know 5 minutes is how long he talked to the first peer. We know 10 minutes is how long he played with the peer, and that was in between the next time he talked to the next peer, but it wasn't the total time because he also rested for 2 minutes. So the total time from the end of this response to the beginning of the next is going to be 10 minutes of playing, 2 minutes of resting, which is going to make 12 minutes. Now, why isn't it 17 minutes? Because this first one, the client talked to them for 5 minutes, that is just the duration of how long the first response lasted. Inter-response time looks at the end of the first response to the beginning of the next. So the end is after the 5 minutes. The time in between is the 10 and the 2, which is 12. And then he starts talking to the next peer. So the inter-response time for talking with peers, 12 minutes. A new technician asks you, at what point are you done shaping a behavior? How might you answer? So what are we doing when we're shaping a behavior? We're reinforcing approximations of behavior until we get to a terminal behavior. And the terminal behavior is that final target we want to see. So at what point are you done shaping a behavior? Well, common sense would say when we see our target behavior. So A, you're done when the terminal behavior is reached. Yes, when we reach our terminal behavior, we've accomplished it, right? And then once we get there, maybe we can adjust, we can make changes, whatever. But technically, once you reach terminal behavior, you're done shaping. B, you're done after the fourth behavior approximation. Well, it's not like that. It just depends on the behavior. You can't just say for sure how many approximations you might need. C, you're never done shaping a single behavior. Well, sure you are. You can be done shaping a behavior. Doesn't mean it's going to present the same way every single time, but you can certainly be done shaping that behavior. So when are you done shaping a behavior? Well, A, you're done when the terminal behavior is reached. Excellent. Check out btexamreview.com for our study materials, our combo pack. Make sure you let us know when you pass so we can include you in this Sunday shout out. As always, work hard, study hard. See you soon.